Writing is about the process. It's about listening and recognizing remnants of your story in the stories of others. When we share our stories with each other, we share the resonance of the human experience. The By Firelight podcast is your invitation to join our circle, a circle of writers, poets, seekers, and storytellers as we capture our living in words. This multifaceted living with joy, grief, love, growth, and loss is shared among us in your legacy, your story. The things you choose to do with your days as they unfold matter here. I'm your host, Betsy Delzer. I'm many things, but in this gathering, I'm a painter, poet, and writer, and I'm honored to be your guide through these episodes. Together, we'll find our muses in the rich and heart-expanding conversations with incredible guests, many who are like minds and all outrageously inspiring hearts. When you press play, you're here in the circle to share this space with us. By Firelight.
Today we hear from Emily Hagenmaier, pronouns she, her. Emily describes herself as a big-hearted eccentric. She's a clinical social worker, consultant for Sesame Workshop, and self-compassion teacher. She loves using her hands for knitting, tinkering, and processing feels. In this episode, we dive into her experience of meditation and meditation retreats, her journey in becoming a meditation teacher, how that's informed her therapeutic processes and being a therapist. We also explore ideas around death, COVID, and her own health and well-being and future through the vehicle of her writing. This is a heart-expanding episode, and I'm so glad you're here for it. Emily, I am so excited for this conversation. In complete honesty and full disclosure, this is our second time interviewing because of a few malfunctions. We had a go at this over the summer. It's amazing how in a short period of time, it feels like I've traveled a long ways since we last spoke. So this place and this conversation feels like it was just in some ways ordained. So I'm really excited to be here with you. As we begin, and before we even really launch into who you are and a little bit of an introduction, I want to start with a quick write kind of concept. I usually end my interviews with that, but I want to try something different because you are always up for something different, right?
It is my brain's superpower. Yes.
Yes. A quick write concept is sort of stream of consciousness. It's when you grab a pen and the first thing that comes to mind is what lands on the page. In this case, we will just be doing this verbally. And so the audience can hear kind of your first thoughts. Okay? All right. Magic is
transgressive, connected to nature, and a feminine superpower.
To touch and to wonder, I
just got to do this last weekend at Old Brick Garden. I was touching the inside of every flower. I was on a meditation retreat all day there, and it's just like the physical experience of touching the petals of a flower. I had no idea how soft some of them are. Yeah, it's really tactile for me. Yeah.
This might be very closely connected then. I feel most alive when?
With friends, either streaking or skinny dipping. I feel most alive then. Yeah.
Also, in full disclosure, we have felt most alive together, haven't we? Yeah. As we think about introducing you to our listener, and many of whom are our dear friends, I'm sure, but I know that this touches beyond our circle of writers and friends. What would your older or younger self want us to know right now and today in this moment?
I feel like I'm in such a point of transition and understanding myself. So I'm 43 and I recently was diagnosed ADHD, which to have a middle-aged diagnosis is really, it's a wild experience. And it also opens up just so much compassion for my younger selves of oh, that's why that was hard. That's why that felt weird. Or that's why you can remember that embarrassing thing you said in second grade still. That's why you're so creative and your nonlinear thinking is a little wacky, but also is totally joyful for you. It's like a way of understanding and just opens up so much more compassion. And I hope my future self is like continuing to channel all of the magic of neurodivergence. I hope so.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I have a few people very close to me that are in similar life circumstances of this sort of unveiling and realizing. And it feels like there are just so many tools and so much knowledge and awareness now than certainly, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago when we were children.
Right. And the way that, like, for me, I veiled as a good girl. And I was really good at my homework and really good at school and did not cause a problem in the classroom. And inside, I was so stressed out, right? So that like opportunity to see people who might not be like flagged as neurodivergent because they're masking or they're so afraid of being shamed. But yeah, to get curious about the like really quiet kids in the classroom, what's going on with them too. Yeah, I think there's like so much more potential for that now, and I'm really glad.
Well, this connects us to your life work to some degree because you are an empathy listener, you are a compassion listener, you are a bright spirit listener, and that is the work that you've stepped into, right? Is stepping into the resonance of the experience of others. And what I mean by that in all of that sort of abstract language is you are a therapist.
But I love the way you described it. That's so much more beautiful. I was like, yes, I want to do that.
Yes, right. By day, you are online. Is it mostly the container that you?
Well, I get to see people like however they're most comfortable. So I'm seeing folks in an office, which feels really good. But also for some people, like the way they can access care is through telehealth. And I'm grateful for that technology.
Do you think the understanding and awareness of the masks you had when you were little and the stress you were covering up inside, how does that help you access some of the struggles of perhaps someone that you're working with now?
The more compassion we can have for ourselves, the more compassion we can have for others. And I think the things in my life that have been very painful or hard or felt like they're going to kill me at certain points can become transformed into ways to connect and ways to witness other people's pain or suffering and to hold it with compassion versus anxiety or pressure to fix. I think it's like there's really, I think in teaching this is probably involved too, but your biggest resource as a therapist is yourself, is your humanity, your vulnerability, your attunement to both yourself and someone else in the room. So I feel like, every time life gets messy and more complicated, I really do feel like it makes me a more effective therapist. Yeah. Which is a relief because life is just going to keep being lifey. Like, it's not going to stop. And that I could bring that to something I really, really love doing is wonderful.
Has the love of practice and or the love of doing and being in your practice, has that always been, or has that grown and changed through your career?
It seemed like it's always been something that is like so easy to be compelled by people's experiences. And I've worked in a wide range of settings and populations, and it's always interesting and compelling. And yeah, I think, I have gained more skills in terms of interventions that I think are more helpful for people, or awareness of like how I need to use my own body or feel boundaries in my own body so that I don't, drain myself or get overly enmeshed with what my client is experiencing. But that it just feels like something like I get paid to do this. Like it's almost kind of easy. I mean, it's not like I care very much about like the efficacy of it, but it feels like something that's easy to show up for on a daily basis. And there are many jobs that, it'd be so hard for me to try to pretend I could do. This one is just easy. Yeah.
Well, and you're just such a gift, sitting across, whether in lifetime and space. I get to do that as your friend, but I can imagine that in this healer role, it's just really, really profound and transformative. So thank you for the work that you love and that you are. It's less like small W work. It's like life calling, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Betsy.
Yeah. We met at a compassion retreat, actually. And then you just mentioned a moment ago with the wonder and meditation. So I want to go down this road for a little bit and just explore this. My experience of our compassion retreat is it's actually a pivot point for me because I had young children at home. And I was at a place in my career where I was just starting to like load up on the trainings, like I had done my integrative yoga therapy training. And then I was starting to really explore what are the modalities of stillness practices and contemplative practices. And so I went to this compassion retreat thinking it was really like, I think in my mind, I thought this was like a meta, like loving kindness, like sort of a compassion for others. And that I was going to be trained in that, which of course you are, but it starts always with Kristen Neff, with self, right? As you said. So I remember having a moment where literally I kind of came and laid into this like monastery where we were. And I looked at the agenda and looked at like what we were about to do and had like this split second thought of like, do I just run? Do I grab my belongings and run? Like I'd only ever done that once, and that was in an adult hip hop class. And that's a whole nother story. But I decided to stay, and it really opened in me this. It opened the ability for me to be in those moments that you said, the moments that I think you said they could kill you, or they could, they just they feel like they might just take you down. I've had those as well, more frequently than I would, of course, have liked to have scripted. And in that place, I think this compassion retreat taught me how to curl up. I can just sort of see myself as a like bird's eye view, like just curl up into like the fetal position and just stroke my own hair, and just say like, babe, this is right now. And like to make a little room for the depth and the width and the experience itself. And then to hold myself in that process and say, it hurts, this hurts, and it won't always feel this way.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that embodiment of self-compassion because it's not just a cognitive process. It's not just the words you say to yourself. It's probably even more like the way you're holding yourself and that soothing touch of caressing your hair, or putting yourself in a position where your body feels safe or more at ease. Like that is so powerful. Like touch is our first sense to develop in utero. You probably know this as a yoga teacher, but I think it's like, oh man, it's so powerful. And if we can come back to just like, what does our body need to feel a little bit more safe or comfortable or at ease, or some support in a moment. And that alone is a deep compassion practice. And I think one of the most effective ones we have.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk to ourselves, which is useful, but like, what's happening below our head is so rich and yeah, it's really loving, right?
Do you remember anything particularly about that retreat that stuck out to you, or where was that in your journey as a compassion practitioner?
Yeah, I had been teaching a class at UW Health in the Mindfulness program. So this is here in Madison, and I've been teaching a class for little kids and caregivers, kind of relational mindfulness practices that are very playful. And I've always been drawn to compassion. That just feels like, yes, I want that. Like I can be that. And it was like so amazing that Kristen Neff came to Madison. It was an incredible opportunity to study with her and Chris Germer. But what really stood out for me in that training was the idea that your inner critic isn't just an enemy, that actually she may really be trying to protect you, but her impact isn't so skillful, but her intention might actually be one of care. She just needs help redirecting the harshness in her voice, or the shame in her voice, or the anxiety in her voice. But I find that like really inspiring, actually. Our body is always trying to protect us, right? Even if it's like not always the most effective means of protection, but that's pretty empowering if we relate to ourselves in that way. So yeah, that I remember that standing out. And then I just remember seeing you across the room and I was like, who is this woman? I just like kept wanting to stare at you. And then I was just so excited when I think we connected in line or something. And yeah, I was just like, oh, I really want to know her. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, I felt the same way. And I think there was that sort of soul recognition of a friendship that perhaps was before we even met in the physical. So I remember that as well. So when did you start meditating? What was that like for you?
I remember being a kid on a gym floor in like a summer theater camp. And the theater teachers would guide us through like a guided visual meditation. And it was so, I think I was like 8. It was so powerful for me. It like felt like freedom and a way to use like pretty noisy, creative mind in support of my body. And I just remember loving that. And I kind of dropped it. I was a ballet dancer at a really intense level for many years, and then went to college and went to get my master's in social work. And they have just an incredible resource at UCLA where I got my social work degree, and I was taking classes with an amazing teacher, Diana Winston. She has so many free resources online through the UCLA MARC. It just was like hooked. I was like, okay, I need this. And I continued taking with her for years when I lived in Los Angeles. My first job out of social work school was as a therapist in a community in Los Angeles called Skid Row. And the community has a lot of history, but it's basically an intentionally like isolated area that has the most dense concentration of houseless people in the country. So it's just, there's a lot of, trauma history, a lot of resilience, and a lot of intensity. And I remember the practices of like grounding, breath practices were really helpful for me as an outsider stepping into that environment. That just was so empowering. And I haven't always had a daily practice, but that kind of the anchors of mindfulness have surfaced when I really need them and helped me get through difficult things. I'm so lucky I get to teach now. Like I'm like shy talking in front of people, but I so believe in the content that I will do it. And it's been really touching to get to do that work.
So just to give people an like actual framework, would you be in like a sangha or like a community of practitioners? Is that like you would go somewhere and practice together?
Yeah, there's a teacher sangha through UW Health that's really dedicated. I have missed a lot of the meetings in the last couple of years just because of family demands, but like incredibly skilled, inspiring teachers in that group. And then whenever I can, I'll go on retreats, usually like more local. I did get to go on a week-long silent retreat 2 years ago. That was amazing. But I think of like, doing the dishes at 4:30 when I'm also trying to help a kid with homework and I'm kind of worn out by then. I have to figure out, what's next in the night or drive someone somewhere. That is also a mindfulness practice. Like, how can I bring compassion to my body that's tired? And how can I stay in those kind of monotonous, not super exciting activities? How can I stay in the love of them? Because they are driven by love. And yeah, I think that's also a practice right now for me.
What you're really referring to in the way I think about it is like the integrated and dedicated practice, right? Like, so like the integrated practice of like the warm water, even the lilt of a child's voice asking a question, just those types of things. Those are the integrated mindful moments. And then the dedicated is kind of what you're talking about with the retreats and the sitting and the communal, as well as, I think we both experience that in a dedicated way on our own. Retreat. Let's break that down just a little bit, because I could imagine some of our friends and even some new friends to us being curious about like, I've always kind of wondered. So you mentioned a silent retreat, but let's go bare bones here and say, like, what do you get? What do you like? I know this feels like a slightly transactional question, but what do you get out of a retreat?
It's vulnerable to do. You get like a level of clarity and quiet that I can't access in a regular week with my life as it is right now with 3 school-age kids. You don't use your cell phone on a retreat. You can even actually like give it up for the week, and it's kind of a ceremony around that. Not having email for a week is like the biggest gift. It is wonderful. So it's vulnerable in that you're sitting with yourself. You're sitting with everything that's ever happened to you, and you have choices about how you're going to meet that experience, how you're going to care for yourself in that experience. And in doing that, just the peace was amazing. It wasn't peaceful the whole time. Like I had moments of like, almost like panic in a meditation. And then I open my eyes, go for a walk. Like you're still caring for yourself in sometimes challenging circumstances, depending on what arises. But giving up my cell phone for a week was amazing, and I would like to give it up permanently. It was so liberating. I recommend it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you have guides in that process, right? When you're on retreat, there are people who kind of curate at least the container of the experience.
Absolutely. That it's very supported and thoughtful. Yeah. Absolutely. And you're practicing in a community and a sangha of other people, which is also deepens practice. Yeah.
Well, one of my dreams is to have a conversation with Diego Perez, whose pen name is Young Pueblo. And he's really well known for going on retreat and then coming back and producing, just like kind of his books come out of a retreat space. And often I think he's 30, 40 days. I mean, it's a long period of time. When you were describing the email, email for me is not a super drain. If we can have categories of super drain, I would say social media is a little bit more of a super drain, but email for me is not a super drain. And I wonder what happens like when we kind of turn off the valve of like just the output or the input, whatever direction it's going. And you're sitting a little bit more with like a potent version of self.
Yes. Oh, so true. Yes.
Right. Like, have you experienced the birthing or conceptualizing or just even gestation maybe of ideas in that space?
The most recent week-long retreat I went on is from a tradition called soul making. And it might be a little bit of a black sheep within Buddhism, but there's so much imagination and magic and creativity in it. So a lot of what can arise from practice is like really strong images that are resources that will come back to you. I've had like image of a beating heart and a sense of like pulling out my heart, looking at it and hearing some message of like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this heart. Like it's been through some things, but it's okay, this heart. It's a lot of imagery that arises. And another image that repeatedly comes back is a sense of like wings sprouting from kind of like your deepest knowing in your belly. Big wings unfurling. That's another image that comes. And they feel like resources. They feel like helpers to get you through a day, get you through email, maybe. Yeah.
Our connection for sure is around writing and this compassion connection. I want to, though, before we go away from this meditation piece and kind of just the practical, right? Like I feel like a lot of my life is just sort of toggling between philosophical and practical all the time. But if there is someone who is curious, has really never, maybe never gone on a retreat, maybe even never meditated or never been exposed in the ways that we have, what's a small way of meeting kind of that crushing moment of life that we described earlier? What's a small starting place that is accessible to somebody who's never done this?
Ah, what a beautiful invitation. What comes to mind for me is like when we are in a place in our lives of heartbreak or devastation or real terror, worry, we can easily start collapsing into that experience. It's just like our focus gets narrow and we're just trying to survive it. In that like hypervigilance, we can lose sight of all of the beauty or the okayness around us. So a practice that I love and was so helpful in the pandemic in particular is kind of letting your eyes move around the space you're in. And it's really like a treat to get to do this out in nature as well, but letting your eyes be free, letting them wander where they want to. And then if there is an object or a color or the sky, a tree, a mushroom, a corner of the wall in the room that you're sitting in all day, it doesn't really matter. But that feels like it's kind of pleasant to look at or like, oh, there's a little bit of curiosity there. There may even be awe, like a big oak tree in a field. There is awe seeing that. So could you let that object show up for you as a helper, as a resource, as something to bring care to your experience? Because when we are in a stress response, it is really hard to take in anything that is okay. And yet there is beauty all the time around us. So how can we let it like really show up for us? Like to notice the ways the world is showing up for you, even in the darkest, hardest times.
That is beautiful. Really beautiful. Thank you for that tip. As you were saying that, I was thinking my COVID practice was for sure, like all of us, we could only walk, go places and walk around. But I remember walking for miles and miles and it was the sky, right? Like just sit with the vastness of the sky.
Yeah.
And fortify your next step with the strength and beauty of the sky.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. And what a thing to be held by,
Yeah. So we write together. That's how I stayed connected to you, because I wanted to put you in my pocket and bring you home after the meditation retreat, the compassion retreat. And so my way of connecting wild, beautiful, messy, glorious women is in this 20 years of our writing experience. So tell us a little bit about your journey as a writer and how you think of yourself in writing and for writing, and just anything you want to share about that.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad that you asked this question again, because I answered it in August and I think I said, I'm not a writer, but now I have a totally different response. I am a writer and I've been writing since third grade, and I loved creative writing in third grade. And I was like a super anxious kiddo that whole year, like just like tears, overwhelmed. No one understood me, like what was going on. But I remember when we got to do creative writing, it was just like freedom, and it felt like all of the imaginative powers of my brain had an outlet, and it felt like liberating. So I'm a writer in third grade. Since having kids 13 years ago, writing has been a way of like stepping out of roles, mostly caregiving roles, and being like, okay, Emily, like what's going on with you? So it's a way to kind of center and come back to myself, which is hard because I'm way more comfortable focusing on what's happening with other people. So it's like a really needed practice, but not easy. And then I'm also a writer for Sesame Street workshop. So for the last, since before the pandemic, actually, I've been helping them integrate mindfulness and compassion into their season curriculum. So the last couple of years, I've read every script that goes through for their show. And that has been so fun to integrate compassion, something that is like a deeply held value and practice for me, into a scene with like Elmo and Cookie Monster is kind of a return to my younger self in the sweetest way. And that has been fun. So I think I'm a writer with Sesame Street too. But yeah, I'm not I'm going to publish a book writer, but a really beautiful friend who is a published writer. Her name is Rebecca Jamieson. She's an amazing teacher and writer. She said to me just this week, all that matters is your relationship with writing. You know, it doesn't have to have like a certain quality or a certain commercial value. It's the creative expression in the relationship. So if that is being a writer, I'm a writer.
I'm really loving that this answer changed over the course of like 6 weeks. It reminds me of something recently that my therapist told me, which was, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change. You're not stuck, you know? And I tell my yogis, like in class, I tell them all the time, like, if you're in a shape and it would be somehow better suited with something else or with a slight shift, you're not stuck, you know? And I think her just saying like, yeah, you can change your mind. So you answered this question 6 weeks ago and now you changed your mind. And I'm so glad. I feel like it's stepping into your more authentic self too, because you are definitely a writer in our group as well. And how has that been for you to be in a community of writers?
I love taking in other people's words and experiences. I know it's so helpful for me to be like, okay, Emily, but what's going on with you? Right. In the 20 minutes where we're just spilling on the page, it is pretty vulnerable for me to read it, even though the group is like always supportive. It's not the group. I think it's more actually, I'm learning, the more I learn about ADHD, it's just a extreme sensitivity and fear of rejection, even when it's not rational at all. So that is a practice of like, okay, I'm going to read. And then there's like a kind of default wiring response of like, oh, I better go hide now. And I'm working with that in the group. It's a really good place to work with that actually, because the members are so supportive.
Well, and I'm wondering about the parallel between your feeling of being most alive is when you're, you know, in your birthday suit in the water.
Yes.
And so in essence, right, like it's another type. I think some of our friends would probably be like, have the opposite. Like I can read and like share what came out of this like clockwork up here and heart work in here. But I don't necessarily want to strip down and jump in the water at midnight, you know? So it's different types of vulnerability, right? But also ultimately just incredible sense of aliveness that happens when we're listening to each other and holding.
It's communally held, right? Yeah.
You brought a couple of things to read to us, speaking of reading, and does it feel as vulnerable right now or not so much because you've had some time?
I don't know. This has been so joyful talking with you on a Saturday morning. Like, yeah, I can do this. Let's see. I think I have 6 pieces. They're short. And I was going through old spill notebooks and I'd like to read the first spill I ever wrote. And it was October 15th, 2018. And we were in the like brand new Wildwood Cafe in Stoughton. So if you're in the Dane County area listening, I like cannot say enough wonderful things about Wildwood Cafe. And this and the next piece are, I think they're exploring death, actually. Some of the trees are going out with a bang, others just wither and brown. I want to go out in a cosmic burst of love. Ezzy entered my body this way. The 3 a.m. orgasm was so bright my brain left my body and a shooting star sped through the sky. I can still see it. After Eric got up to pee and I realized this is probably my fertile period. I just knew right then. Not planned, but supernaturally destined. She still is a burst of love. Last year she told me, Mama, before I was born, I rode here on a shooting star and it was soupy fun. That's how I want to go out. Okay, this next one is from this summer, July 29th, my 43rd birthday. And it was a really special spill. And Betsy, you had invited us to write to ourselves at different ages, all ending in 3. So write to yourself at 13 or 53 or 3 years old. And we did, I think, 5 intervals of that. You picked the age and then we shared. It was incredibly touching. This one is a letter to myself at 103. You are part of a mycelial network, just like Ross Gay told you joy was. You create pathways for life to move through. You support stubborn crocuses in the snow. I don't know what state you are in, but it turns out it doesn't matter. You wonder if you are in that spot where Betsy and Cynthia left their sacred pockets, the ones you tucked your grieving hands into. You are dew and a force of nature that wills raindrops to pollinate you. You feel the fullness of your breath and the pause between breaths. You savor this pause. You hold all your mistakes like a heaping bouquet. You are both light and darkness. You do not have to be good. You do not have to worry, will the children survive? Will the Republicans win? You know that you and these Republicans are interconnected, that they too permeate you just as you beam your light onto them, together in a collective project willing new life into being. You give yourself permission to pause now. You hold yourself at 43 with a glimpse of this same love.
One of the things we do is like sit with lines, right? There's so many. I was really trying to capture a few, but the ones that from both pieces, I just kind of wrote a small stream and I just want to repeat them as a way of affirming that I felt them and saw them. Cosmic burst of love. I can still see it. Supernaturally destined. Pathways for life to move through. And permission to pause now. I think when you read that night, I just remember that collective exhale because all of us around are raising children right now and at different phases of raising. But I haven't meditated or had the forethought to think about, like, what will it be like to no longer worry about children being, and I know that my mother still, she would be the first person to say she still worries about us every single day and turns that into prayers all the time. But there's the underbelly of the moon in that of like, oh yeah. The comfort is really profound in how you put that. We had talked about me reading my 103 as well. Should I do it? Okay.
Yes.
Let's see if I can read my handwriting because I think this was this before or after the swim? It was before.
Before, but it was late.
It was late. Yeah. Okay. The flowers have grown over your landing place. Handfuls of bouquets springing from your grounds, the marked place of your ashen departure. Remember me in the vast blue sky. The way your lungs feel when full, the deepest breath you've been craving. And on the out-breath, look at the palms of your hands. I am in every line, every tributary, I am there. When you watch the tall grass sway, my breath is over the blades. And when you see the droplets on a single leaf, my tears are balancing in the water, holding steady and still.
The peace in receiving that from you is akin to a week with no cell phone at a meditation retreat. Love everywhere and everything. Yeah.
All right, you have some more.
I think I'll go. So there's like two more themes. I think I'm going to go COVID writing now. Yeah. So this is a time where we were not able to gather, and we met on Zoom, and it felt like a lifeline for a lot of us. Some members of the spell were, like working directly in healthcare, and it's a really intense time. So this is from June 29th, 2020, and it's called Quarantine as Metamorphosis. In Goth Park, I see the crevice in the tree, and I let parts of my broken longing reside there. Did you know the hard-shelled chrysalis was inside the caterpillar's body the whole time? I feel you in my restless longing, the center of the pattern, cocoon of creativity and teeth. We don't talk about the messy annihilation of the caterpillar and metamorphosis. I don't share the map of my heart with you because you aren't good at it. But I've been writing you 1,001 letters in my head, and I've been talking to you not just in my dreams. This is one from like 2 months later, so August 16th, 2020, and it's called COVID Cut. In the palm of my hand, I hold scissors, recommended as good enough on Amazon. I point for you to sit in the chair. You are quiet and obedient. With some hesitation, I begin to chop 5 months of New York Times articles, Zoom links, Costco chips, heavy sighs. And then without fear, I feel my power. Brown tufts cover the patio. You are mine. I want to be wearing a shiny dominatrix suit, stretched out skin of motherhood contained and smoothed by the pleather bodice. What I'm actually wearing is a frumpy Lands' End swim shirt and full coverage undies, legs unshaven and prickly. I straddle you, clipping wayward strands around tender ears. I'm alive for the first time in months. And one more COVID era. This is from October 2020, like about exactly 4 years ago. It's called genuflection. Under the bridge, we pause to take in webs of cream and spiders. I draw you closer to the spiders than you want to be. Do you know I have your heart and will protect you? Under the tree, nighttime limbs dance and roots pull at our feet. A branch just your size, weathered by wind and loss, feels right in your hand, like coming home to yourself. I carve in the sand your credo. You see, I see you. Creature. Wind and water and time will wash it away, but I'll still see. I tumble and can't find my footing with you. There's no possibility of balance in this alchemy. I want in my mouth, under my fingernails, in my soul, a holy body consumed to merge, no longer two, but one in everything. The webs, the tree, the bodies, the lights that will eventually burn out. I wrap this knowing around you to mind you when you can't sleep. You kneel in reverence, lit from within. To see and be seen in this way is the death of separation. I have 2 more short ones. And I think for a long time in spell, I have been working with a kind of knowing of a really complex family history of hereditary cancer. And it's in men and women in my family. And my aunt died from breast cancer in her 50s. And it really, I think I was 20, 21, 22 when she died. It just really left an impact. And in Spill, I have been integrating what that means and what my healthcare could look like. And so this is a piece from December 2018, like my first few months in Spill. And yeah, When I was 5, I stuffed Kleenex in my 80s striped Jane Fonda leotard. I got in trouble. But boobs were so tempting and alluring. I didn't get my full-blown ones until I was 18, and then they made up for lost time. I anticipate someday I'll need to say goodbye, that they'll become more of a liability than worth keeping around. Mama, I love your mukas. They are so soft and squishy, as he says as she motorboats me. 2 nights before the yearly MRI, I had a dream that I was going to have a double mastectomy, and I was truly okay. I could handle it. Then this more recent one from August, this past summer, is inspired by a deep knowing that came to me that night of the spill when we were writing to ourselves at all our different ages. And it's kind of the force that has helped me know that it is time for me to have the preventative surgery. And I feel like the opportunity to deeply connect with myself in spill is what has helped me navigate that. So one last one. 1 a.m. swim, pre-all-nighter gummy, post-heart-wrenching, life-affirming spill. We are a range of joy with gusto, mildly chicken, and brave but coochie-invading slug-wary. We offer our middle-aged-ish mom goddess buns to the pink crescent moon. I emerge several days later and now 43. It is time. A knowing in the deepest part of me, it's okay to let go of something you loved to become more of yourself.
I'm just jotting, knowing in the deepest part of me. And that time just, it is time.
Yeah. And I feel like so much peace around that knowing. And that knowing was connected to imagery I was describing from the meditation retreat of like the wings sprouting, and like, I guess it's all integrated in there. But I know the surgery itself will be, really uncomfortable and a pain in the butt. But I feel like so confident that it's the right thing and the right time in a way that I hadn't really landed in before. And I do think that the writing in spill is what helped me clarify that. And the support of other people in spill too. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, we will be here with you every step of the way. And I think it could be a gift that you've had this think time, and the compassion that you meet yourself with, right, is all in this. It's all bound up. And I think about, our bodies are miraculous machines. And I think about this area of your body being right around your incredibly effervescent heart.
Yeah. I think when I first started thinking about it, it was like, if I'm not like squishy and like mushy, like, which is such a part of the way I express love, am I still going to feel loving? That was like something I had to work through, but I will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, at the center of the flower, right? The center of the flower, All right, my friend, the last time we did this interview, you said there was nowhere people could find you.
Oh, that's so good.
I'm curious if that answer has changed.
I am in season 52 of Sesame Street. Like, my heart and spirit are all over that season, and they will also be all over the upcoming season that is, I think, in the process of getting ready to film now. So I'm there. I am like totally in Elmo's voice. Let's see, I've got meditations that anyone can listen to on the UW Health Mindfulness website, and in my practice website. It's called Ginkgo Tree Counseling. I am not a post on Instagram person, but I really do love when other people post. A selfish consumer of Instagram. Yeah, you'll find me in a tree that's kind of weird and brings you in with awe, I'm in there too. Yeah. Thank you. This was such a treat. And
yes,
Betsy, I'm really grateful for you.
Right back at you, Love Beam. Right back at you.
By Firelight is a Lit Path Studios production and is produced by Jamie Gale and Betsy Delzer. Music is by Legito Music and Pond 5. Thank you for being a part of our beautiful collection of stories.